Utøya Island, 500 meters off the coast of mainland Norway.
It's our paradise. It's like this island is the most beautiful thing on earth.
On Utoya, children, the youngest 14, group leaders in their early 20s, and mentors. A man called Anders Behring Breivik wanted to kill them, one at a time. The paranoid schizophrenic had 654 from whom to choose.
These children were like sitting ducks. There was nothing they could do.
When he started to shoot, everybody just ran everywhere in the cabin, screaming and shouting, and there was chaos inside. And I was just under the bed, but I thought, oh my God, he's going to get in. He can hear that so many people are inside.
The text messages were saying like, there's shooting out here, I'm hiding, I'm underneath a table, I see dead people around me, my friend has been shot, I love you, I love you, I love you.
In the water that day, a group swimming for their lives.
When I saw that he was aiming for us, I thought that I'm going to swim normally and hope that if he hits me, I hope that I die and I die quick. I don't want to suffer.
Anders Behring Breivik, blonde, middle class, what he might call Aryan. Behind the appearance, what was going on inside the mind of a serial killer. Anders Behring Breivik had planned his big entrance for a long time. This was his stage, his moment in the spotlight. Why had he killed 77 people? Because Norway was broken.
He was the one that had to fix this. He was the one that had to give everybody a wake-up call. The whole world, all of Norway couldn't see what was going wrong. It was up to him. And once he started this, then the whole world would get it and he would be a hero.
The Norway of Anders Behring Breivik was pure, uncontaminated, clean, a land of extremes and of beauty, with boundless drifts of virgin snow in the north, plentiful seas in the south, and sophisticated towns and cities. Its capital, Oslo, the envy of Europe. Rich, too, oil-rich. Breivik may not have approved, but it is also the birthplace of a global institution whose very name resounds with the country's values.
When you think of Norway, you think of tolerance, you think of the Nobel Prize, you think of peace. Certainly you don't think of murder. Certainly you don't think of racism.
For Breivik, Norway had gifts that few other nations could dream of, and God had made it that way. Norway's Lutheran Church had always preached simple principles, austere, unfussy, imposing doctrines of hard work and loyalty to the king and country. For Breivik, a Norway pure in word, deed, and race, an Aryan Norway, white. But a Norway at risk. To the paranoid Breivik, it was under attack from people of different colour, different faith.
Norway has an incredibly vibrant immigrant community. In 1980, there were about 1,000 people of Muslim extraction. 30 years later, there were 120,000. This didn't really agree with everybody, and we know that Breivik didn't like it at all.
There is not liking something, and then there's detonating a bomb in the heart of a city before deciding 69 times later that day to take aim and kill a person. Anders Behring Breivik, something of a loner, needed followers to his anti-immigrant, anti-Islam cause. He needed to become noticed, and what better way than to murder as many of his enemies as he could, and to target their children too, those he called Category B traitors.
Suddenly he fired maybe 5 shots, and all I can remember is that suddenly there was a kid missing from our group.
The journey to understanding Anders Behring Breivik begins with his childhood, privileged but troubled.
Breivik's family were actually very well respected in Norway. His father was a diplomat, his mother came from an old, well-established, well-respected family. So in many ways, he had all the founding to kind of grow up and do something that could have mattered.
When a baby, Anders' parents divorced. Later, a custody battle coincided with poor performance at school. 2 reports suggested he be taken into foster care.
At some point, issues started to emerge.
He was experiencing a big sense of rejection. In fact, it was reported that there had been suggestions that he should be taken into care because this divorce was so difficult.
If a youngster is exhibiting psychological stress, whether due to a parental split or issues at school, then these should be addressed. Usually they will resolve themselves, but if they don't, then we might have something to worry about.
But who could possibly know how worried Norway should be? As he grew, Breivik seemed to seek certainty in institutions other than his family. He became a regular in a Church of Norway chapel. At school, he formed few friendships. He joined the right-of-centre Progress Party's youth wing at the same time as it was proposing tightening immigration laws. By 15, he was a low-level delinquent, ordered to do community service and pay a fine for spraying graffiti, one of 3 minor offences that brought the adolescent Breivik to the attention of the authorities. Upon leaving Handel's gymnasium or school, Breivik avoided military service in the Norwegian army. He may have felt rejected. If he did, it became a pivotal moment in the history of Norway. Breivik opted instead to pursue a different means of serving his country. In 2001, he began to write a manifesto of his beliefs.
Breivik establishes 2 separate lives, the official one that is known to his friends, and a darker side in which he is writing a manifesto of hate against Islam and against the immigrants in his country, and promoting himself as a successful businessman, and when in fact he is a failure living at home with his mum.
The business ventures haven't worked. Socially, he's not very popular. He doesn't have any meaningful relationships, either professionally or personally.
The manifesto, as he called it, became Breivik's Mein Kampf. It was to reveal his mind, as few other killers have ever done. He espouses the virtues of far-right political thinking, details the wrongs of immigration, and bizarrely champions the cause of an ancient order of knights who fought in the Crusades against Islam. But the manifesto also, chillingly, detail his plans for systematic murder.
It was a simple thing, really, simple sequence. Publish the workings of his mind, commit the mass killings, and then step back and await the uprising.
There was one other thing about his manifesto. For now, he was keeping it secret. The first day of Camp 2011 was like those for young people going back a generation. Utøya was cloudless, warm. Not only Labour Party supporters loved the island.
I was there with an organisation called Nature and Youth, and the island very much reflected exactly that. It was awfully idyllic. It's the kind of vacation you never ever want to end, you know. You just think that I want to live here forever and ever, and the world would be only a peaceful place if everybody would get the chance to spend a week here.
Breivik was on his way to the island paradise, the place of peace. If anyone had been able to read his manifesto, they would know he didn't feel the same way about Utøya, or those currently on it. In 2011, the mind of a 32-year-old Norwegian, Anders Breivik, had descended into a dark, dangerous place. His childhood had been blighted by family discord. He'd had turbulent teenage years, and as an adult, he had failed at business. He had not made it into Norway's army and had few friends.
Rejection is a powerful driver of discontent. So if this feeling is internalized, if Breivik feels that he is a total failure, and at the same time other issues are developing, such as an extreme hatred of immigrants, then we have the development of a dangerous situation. Nobody can tell what might happen to Breivik. He's a loner, he feels rejected by the people that he most believes in, and he's not talking to anybody about it.
Breivik was deliberately keeping a low profile.
If you don't communicate what you're thinking or what you're doing, you'll fly under the radar. He wasn't part of a right-wing scene in Norway. He didn't use the internet to communicate with others, and so nobody really knew what was going on.
For the decade before 2011, Breivik refines an image of himself. He creates a character in his own definition of the world, one far removed from the multicultural, multi-ethnic Norway of the 21st century. To him, he was Breivik, the cultured young businessman, the Freemason, the heir to the Knights Templar, the Crusaders who had tried to wipe out Islam. And all of this he puts in his manifesto.
He begins by interviewing himself. So, this narcissism it shines out so strongly. He asks himself 100 questions because he believes this is clearly what the world would want to know. They'd want to know who this important, brilliant man was. So, the first pages aren't necessarily about what's going to happen. It's about, this is me, and you need to know because you'll want to know about me. And it's very punctuated by the need to be seen as someone important, as a game changer, as someone who will go down in history as making a difference.
Breivik obsessively played video games. Records show him spending hundreds of hours a year online playing World of Warcraft. In it, he embarked on missions and quests, crusades. He borrowed from its iconography in his manifesto.
He had some very specific drawings for how his tomb should look. A Knights Templar construction with columns and gold lettering. He had this kind of fantasy land that he lived in, of the fatherland Norway battling the communist hordes.
It's strange to think how he came to arrive at the age of 30 with this extremely warped view of the world, a sickness in his mind that just grew and grew and grew.
In Breivik's world, there are the bad guys, and there are those who kill them, the good guys, like him.
Someone who's very narcissistic like that can't say, well, it's my fault. It's my fault. Maybe I should have made different choices. Maybe if I go back to school, there's something I can do. They won't think about it constructively. They'll fester, they'll get quite angry, and they'll think, well, whose fault is it? And it's always easier to blame other people. And what better than to blame something that historically happens time and time again? We blame the minority, we blame the other, we blame institutions, people that seem to be getting on. And for Breivik, it was the political establishment and the Muslim minority in Norway. They were at the center of his hate. They were the cause of who he had become.
Obviously, if you are an immigrant to Norway, you are a target. But he was also angry with others, the politicians that he saw as responsible for the immigrants being there, particularly politicians of the left. Breivik was planning mayhem and murder, and nobody knew.
He comes up with this plan. He is going to make as much noise as possible. He's going to be as disruptive and destructive as possible, kill as many people as possible, because when he does, then people will read his manifesto that he's going to publish online. And then his theory is when they do, they'll be inspired. They won't be horrified. They'll be inspired. They'll understand him. And then all the social change that he's been hoping for that would make him great, well, that'll start.
Breivik, Norway's deluded, self-styled avenger, had chosen his targets. Category A traitors were politicians and immigrants. Category B were their friends and family. He spent years planning, travelling in all weathers throughout Eastern Europe, building an arsenal of weapons and explosives.
He was incredibly meticulous about the detail. He made sure that, again, he flew under the radar, military-grade hardware, but bought over periods of time from different places. He made sure that he bought them outside of Norway. And it was the same with the chemicals. He had to amass amounts of chemicals that he needed to create these bombs, but he did it over 3 years. Meticulous planning, always outside Norway, so the authorities ignored him.
On July 22, 2011, staff were arriving at government offices in Oslo city centre. Ivan Thorsen, a keen amateur footballer, was training to be a lawyer in Oslo. That day, he had a date.
I was walking back from work and I was supposed to meet my girlfriend in the town.
Norway's national newspaper, VG, has its offices adjacent to the government district. That day was like any other to veteran reporter John Magnus.
I've been covering, conflicts and earthquakes and tsunamis and stuff for 40 years. And I'm not that easy scared.
For news editor Marius Teitler, a Friday, also like any other.
I was on duty as a news editor in our newspaper. We were just finishing our meeting where we were planning our weekend editions.
Around the corner from them, Anders Breivik had put in motion the plans of a decade. For the image-obsessed Breivik, those plans began with dressing the part.
In his mind, the moment he puts on those black military clothes and gets in the car and decides to do it, that's his moment of transformation from Breivik the failure to Breivik the warrior.
He was dressed to kill, and earlier he had uploaded his life's work to date, his manifesto.
It's not very often that a multiple killer writes down what he's going to do for the whole world to see, and that's exactly what Breivik did.
He wanted people not to think that he was some random crazy killer, that he was a very learned, thoughtful person that had put thought into this. This also was a testament again to how he saw himself as important. This was his press release to the world about who he was.
Breivik had already parked a van packed with explosives in Grubagata, the government district.
He chooses the area of Oslo where the government has its offices. The government has let the immigrants into the country, and so politicians are also his target.
At 3:25 in the afternoon, Breivik detonates the bomb.
The first thing I remember is a thunder, or what I thought was a thunder. That turned out to be the bomb attack in the center of Oslo. I was sitting at work and finishing up a reportage, and we just heard like a huge bam, and it was reported to be horrible weather that weekend, so we thought, okay, now it's starting. And then we started getting reports in that there had been a bomb in the center.
I was walking down the pavement at Grubagata when suddenly I heard a huge bang, and I saw flames coming into my right-hand side.
We can feel and hear this big blast.
was, sitting on the front desk in my office, sort of minding my own business, and suddenly it's boom.
Anders Behring Breivik, product of a broken marriage, army reject, failed businessman, delusional adherent to a medieval cause who up to the age of 30 spent most of his time at home with mum, who hated Islam, immigrants and Norway's leftist politicians, had left the world of fantasy and video games and was causing misery, terror, death.
He is a mission killer. He's doing God's work. He believes that he has the right to go out there and slaughter a whole lot of innocent people.
I could see a lady just 10, 15 meters from me. And yeah, or there wasn't a whole body, there were parts of a body. So yeah, that was horrible to see.
We looked up to this main building in the government district where the Prime Minister has his offices, and the building was totally damaged. All windows were blown out.
There were people screaming, crying, but in the middle of the screaming and crying there was it was dead silence in a way. I mean, it was just very, very scary. I saw people, kind of walking about, bleeding, people lying on the sidewalk, bleeding. I went for a walk around the government block, like a 5 minutes thing. I saw dead people there. I saw a guy hanging out from a window in one of the ministries. He was lifeless.
The work of the tortured mind of Anders Behring Breivik. 8 people died. On the operating table, Ivan Thorsen was hallucinating under the influence of the drugs that he'd been given.
I heard in the background, damn, we lost him. And I was lying there in the darkness, and I was convinced that I'm dead now. And I thought to myself that I really wanted to get more of my life, and this is so unfair. And I was actually really mad.
Breivik had carried out his spectacular. The world did now want to know about who had carried out the atrocity. It was assumed the worst was over.
I definitely thought that it was just one incident that happened. I had a hard time believing that this had even happened. And once it had, obviously, we're not used to things like this in Norway, so I can only speak for myself, but I definitely thought that then it was over.
I may be too stupid, but I thought, this happens once, it doesn't happen twice.
But that was to be ignorant of the mind of Anders Behring Breivik, who was on his way to Utoya. Utøya Island, owned and managed by the Norwegian Labour Party AB. Small, a short walk from one side to the other. To generations, members of the AUF, the youth wing of the party, summer camp on Utoya is more a state of mind than a place.
Sleeping in tents, it was making friends, it was getting your first kiss.
We play football, we play volleyball, people meet, people fall in love, you get friends for the rest of your life.
It was staying up late with your guitar.
There was great weather, we swam, we learned so much about the AUF because that was, I became a member just 3 days before.
It was probably the best week of every summer throughout my youth.
I made friends for life there, and it was incredible summer, and I think that I became more active in AF after the first time I went on Utøya because it was so great.
Very many people have a very strong emotional bond to this place, and it's very understandable.
If you look at the names around the island, how you call like that different pathway or that little, the little mountain that's over there, it's all like, you know, it's the love path, or it's the little mountain of friendship. Utøya is peace, Utøya is love, Utøya is friendship, and it's joy, and it's youth who want to change the world for the better. And it's always been like that.
I think it's unique for so many people to go to this place and to this summer camp out of their own free will and just be together because they share a political view.
A political viewpoint not shared by Anders Behring Breivik. To him, Utøya was a breeding ground for left-wing policies, the ones which had encouraged immigration, to cause the contamination of Christian white Norway. Breivik drove the 90 minutes from Oslo to arrive at a jetty where a ferry is moored. It provided the only means of getting to Utøya Island.
He knew he'd caused a spectacular killing. That was what he wanted. He could have stopped right there, but he did not.
News of the explosion was spreading. Details were scant.
Online we were able to publish the first news flash right outside from the street. The front page editor, he borrowed a laptop and then just published one sentence. There has been a big explosion in Oslo city center. We will get back with more information later.
A guy from another county comes into this room and says, "Oh my God, you have to open the Newsnet site." And suddenly, you know, there's this big headline, explosion in Oslo.
We said that first of all, we're just going to stay here. It's the safest place on earth, she said. And we're going to have a barbecue and we're going to have fun.
On a situation with a lot of youths on an island, hysteria could spread quite fast. So they spend a lot of time saying, you know, Utøya is the safest place to be, and we are on an island, and nothing can harm us here.
A response Breivik had surely anticipated in his planning.
And I remember that people raising their hands and asked, "Is there still going to be disco tonight? Is there still going to be the same program?" And they said, "We don't know yet. So just try to get in touch with everybody in Oslo, and we'll come back later."
On board the MS Thorbjorn, Johannes Giske received a message.
At that point, I got a call on the radio from the mainland saying that there is a police officer who wants to go to cross onto the island, and could a boat come over. We had cancelled all the rest of the scheduled boat crossings because we weren't expecting anyone. So I called the captain, and we decided that, okay, we're going to go down, we're going to pick this guy up.
As he approached the mainland, Johannes saw Breivik dressed in what appeared genuine police uniform. Breivik was a man of many uniforms.
He was wearing a kind of like a wetsuit. It looked a bit like a wetsuit with body armor or something on his chest, and a handgun on his thigh, and a very large rifle. And he had this very, very heavy box, black, kind of hard case, which someone helped him to carry onto the boat. He had these iPod headset that I thought was a bit strange, because, you know, this is the heaviest police in Norway. Has to be, you know, they're coming here to protect us, and why are they using iPods? But, you know, I thought, who am I to judge? You know, this could be some top secret, fantastic contraption they use to communicate with each other or something.
In fact, in his manifesto, Breivik had written that he would need to listen to his iPod as he began shooting to drown out the noise of any screaming. It might affect his resolve. The ferry slowly made its way to Utøya Island before docking 100 yards from the main reception hut.
When the captain left, he said, okay, but if you leave, you have to lock the boat. We never did that, but now he said, lock the boat, because, you know, this is strange, something is happening. And it is while I'm doing this, while I'm trying to lock this boat, that I hear gunshots for the first time.
It was 5:22 in the afternoon. Breivik was armed with a Glock pistol on which was engraved the word Mjolnir, the name given to the hammer used by the Norse god Thor. He also had a bayoneted rifle on which was engraved the word Gungnir, the name given to the spear used by the Norse god Odin. He first killed 2 adults. Then he ordered a group of youngsters to gather around him before beginning to shoot them. Some ran.
I saw 2 girls running up towards the tent camp, and they were shot and killed. It was so weird to see, because we're used to see in movies and such that there's blood splatter and people screaming and all that kind of stuff, but they didn't make a sound. They just fell to the ground and suddenly didn't move.
Breivik walked slowly from one group of young people and children to another as he methodically killed.
He wore headphones, and he would go from cabin to cabin, from tree to tree, literally picking off people, the way that he'd probably done 1,000 times before in his games. And one wonders if that's how he played the games. Was it, you know, getting into that mindset of, you know, it may be that he was drowning out the cries and the sounds, but I wonder if it was just something that improved his shot. It was just getting into that game that he was good at.
Despite his precautions, Breivik's headphones will not have shielded him from the noise of those he was hunting.
It's likely that between tracks on his iPod, he could hear the kids. They were screaming, they were running, they were terrified, but on he went.
It was probably around 5:55, just over half an hour after he had first killed, that Breivik approached the cabin in which Lisa Marie Husby was sheltering. She had been able to hear much of what was going on.
Suddenly we heard somebody outside, and he took the doorknob. There was chaos inside, and I was just under the bed, but I thought, oh my God, he's going to get in. He can hear that so many people are inside. So he shot 2 times through the window of the door, but he just left. And it's a miracle, because we were almost 50 people inside.
There were 564 on the island. Was he going to kill them all?
He wants a spectacular, to make a big impact all over the world and overnight. He wants to be the killer of a lot of people.
Breivik had killed relentlessly for 50 minutes, as Christopher and the children that were following him ran frantically away from the sound of gunfire.
Suddenly there were some shots that went through the trees. We could hear them really, really close, which made, I think, all of us just snap out of what we were doing. And it suddenly became really clear to me that we had to get away from here really quickly. I was standing around maybe 30 kids, and I just yelled out to all of them that we have to get away from here. So we're going to run down to the beach, and we're going to swim for land.
Breivik will have known that safety advice for anyone swimming in the cold waters of a Norwegian fjord included wearing a wetsuit at all times and never going beyond 10 meters from shore. Cramp can set in so quickly that being able to return to the shoreline promptly is vital. The youngsters with Christopher now faced a journey of around 200 meters without wetsuits.
So I yelled out to everybody that they should take their clothes off and get into the water and start swimming.
I think he very much wanted to create chaos and terror. This was something that wasn't a knee-jerk reaction. He'd thought about this for a very long time. He knew that this would cause the utmost chaos. The very location of this island you can't get to by car, which means it would have given him the longest amount of time. This wasn't something that police could just run and come to. These children were like sitting ducks. There was nothing they could do.
The water was cold and it was rainy and windy and everybody was panicking. Some were getting cramps already. We weren't even halfway over. I figured that if I do backstroke, it's more not relaxing, but I don't use quite as much energy doing it. So I started to do that, and I could also get an overview of what was happening with the kids that were back on land. Just as I figured out that, he took up his rifle and he shot the kids that didn't want to swim. Because at the point there was no place to hide at all, it was all open.
Few serial killers get to kill as many times as Breivik, but on that island he took a conscious decision. He looked out, he took aim, and he killed 69 times.
I saw him pointing his rifle at me, at us, and I thought that I'm not going to watch him shoot me, so I'm going to turn around and swim normally again. And if I die, I hope I die quickly. And he fired some shots. I tried to keep my head low, so I was a bit underwater and stuff. But suddenly there was a kid missing from our group. I didn't know where he went.
Perhaps tired, perhaps he felt enough victims had been claimed, but at 6:25 he stopped shooting and reached for his mobile telephone.
Ja, god dagen. Her kommandør Anders Behring Breivik i den norske antikommunistiske motstandsbevegelsen. Jeg er på Utøya for øyeblikket. Jeg ønsker å overgi meg. Ok. Hvilket nummer ringer du fra? Jeg ringer fra en mobil. Du ringer fra din mobil? Ja. Det er ikke min mobil, en annen. En annen. Hva heter det for noe? Hallo? Hallo?
Then there comes a moment where he stops. He feels that his mission is complete, and he calmly picks up the phone, calls the police, says, "I am Commander Breivik. I'm finished my mission. You can come and get me." So at no time does he see himself as someone who has perhaps caused one of the most horrific attacks of recent memory. He sees himself as a commander, as a leader, as someone who has to do this to wake people up.
He went there because he wanted to get right into the heart of attacking the Norwegian Labour Party, and he saw young Norwegian people becoming the political leaders of their Labour Party, and he wanted to attack where it hurt the most.
Breivik now believed Norway would change. The country would unite behind him. In fact, it united against him, and the young people who had survived his merciless killings determinedly unchanged.
My values might be even stronger than they were before.
I feel sorry for him in a way, and I know that it sounds weird, but I think that we are so many people standing together, and it must be so lonely in his world. Imagine he has nobody now. He's going to be alone for the rest of his life. And we are hundreds of thousands that stands together and believe in our cause, and we have each other, and we will always have each other.
I just see him and he's there, and yeah, I want to feel a sort of hate to him, and I feel, of course, a bit hate, but it's empty. It's empty inside of me.
This guy was white, he was a Christian, he was a born Norwegian, raised Norwegian. I guess at least we have learned that evil doesn't necessarily need to come from outside. It might be among us.
Is Breivik a serial killer? To be considered by criminologists as one, Breivik would have struck in Oslo, then disappeared from the scene, only to resurface later. But his was a plan which sought maximum and immediate impact. Victims would need to come thick and fast. Nevertheless, he may well qualify in this appalling category of killer.
This is not just the act of a spree-killing madman. It is a series of murders. He might have stopped at Oslo, he might have stopped at the ferry, he might have stopped after the first cabin that he shot into. But no, he goes on, searching for more victims.
Psychologists interviewed Breivik for many hours. Their lengthy findings concluded that he was a paranoid schizophrenic and had been since at least 2006, but that he was sane throughout the day that he killed 77 people. Breivik was eventually sentenced to 21 years in prison, but is unlikely ever to be released. Unusually, we know much of what was going on inside his mind and about his life.
Yes, he experienced the trauma of divorce, but so many kids do. Yes, he experienced the difficulty of not fitting in. A lot of people do. Yes, he wasn't successful in his job. Almost all of us at some point have to experience failure. In and of themselves, these things couldn't have made him who he was. But it was like a perfect storm at every point of his life, whether it was rejection, whether it was a feeling that he didn't belong, whether it was a projection onto a minority, whether it was his narcissism, whether it was his biochemistry, everything came together.